Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today is this podcast's 1 year anniversary. It's Sleeping Through the
Woohoo!
Night. Woo!
We stuck to it for
Stuck
one
to
year.
it. So, yes, we started this podcast a year ago. And I promised Isaac that there's a joke that if you make it through 3 episodes, that you have already lasted longer than 90% of podcasts. I don't
I
know
don't even
how.
know how true that is.
Yeah, I don't know how true it is, but there's lots of articles that say it.
Well,
So I mean, it's truthy on the internet. Like the internet definitely says that.
it is. It's hard to keep a schedule with it. You really got to plan. Today is episode number 45. If we've been doing it for a year, it should have been episode 52, right?
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I think we're kind of, I remember us bouncing around with, we can't make it this week to begin with, and then later going, let's record 2 this week to have a backlog in case we can't record the next week, or
And
let's
immediately
change
we then
it.
use. Yeah,
Let's change it to releasing on Fridays at the same time, and
I think that was a big one. I think
yeah,
because when we started, it was record and then immediately release,
right, yeah,
and
that
so
night
it
on
was.
Wednesdays, yeah,
And I think having it okay, we're going to release Friday morning, no matter when we record, made it a
mm-hmm.
little bit easier because then it was like, okay, well, we know that, and then we can build a backlog, which our backlog is currently 0. We have no buffer as of this recording.
Living on the edge.
Living on the edge. But we're out of really good, terrible stories to tell. The Failure Fridays. I am out of good failure. Don't get me wrong. I have lots of fuck ups, but none that are like good stories.
Right. Yeah, I could talk about all kinds of just random things, but I don't think they're worth talking about. Nothing really beats the FBI rated by my customers
Right, or
story. It's a really good one.
It's good. Yeah, you don't want to top that.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. What other job will I look for next?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be ever. It's like, well, there was this time that I was in the office when the FBI raided us. It's like, you don't want that either.
So, unless other exciting things happen, that's, I guess, we have to keep our eyes and ears out for other interesting guests, maybe for the podcast, or maybe keep beating the drum for like, hey, does anybody out there have a cool story to share? Because we know there have been failed rewrites; they're all over the place. We just, we haven't talked to every single person. We've had quite a few guests though on our show.
Yeah, I just counted 10. We've had 10 different
guests.
people. Some have been on twice,
but not all talking about just rewrites, though. I think a fair amount of them though.
We have strayed over time, so we've gone from hammering hard on rewrites to rewrite adjacent things like testing and iteration. And the things that you need to get good at in order to avoid the rewrite in the first place. And then we've kind of, like in January, we did a lot on, hey, there have been layoffs. Layoffs are happening. And let's talk about interviewing and layoffs. And
I think that's smart, though. I think that's, there's only so many things you can do when you say, hey, you shouldn't rewrite before people are like, yeah, we get it.
Right, so it's right there in the title.
It for a bit.
Should you rewrite? No, it's right there. Never do that.
So scattering some episodes in there about topical things. Like I think the one recently we did about should you rewrite after AI gets good enough to do so? Because it kind of flips it on its head. Like, never rewrite was the paradigm of our age. What if that age changes? That's kind of a cool, way to rephrase it. So coming up with ideas like that, or like when we had our conference back in October, and then we saw the use of AI in writing documentation and things like that. It's a really cool way to kind of scatter some interesting tech bits that make the podcast still a little more interesting than just the title.
Right. Yeah. The other one was when AI writes your documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting that in both cases we were pro AI, but we weren't pro the use case.
Yeah. Well, it's because the use case is like still a bit bumpy. It's still a bit, what's the word for it? Immature.
Immature. Well, I've got a series going on my blog right now where, I started riffing on the idea of, what if AI could do a rewrite, and it translated to my blog of, well, what I really think AI is going to do for developers is it's not going to replace our jobs anytime soon. What it's going to do is it's going to unlock this whole vast capability for what I'm calling the unprofitable low end. Like, people who aren't developers, who can't do something through the UI or can't do it efficiently or effectively, but they want to do something, and the API will allow it. And if they can let the AI do it, that's going to, there's just going to be an explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the code is not performant and it's not resilient and all the rest of the problems that you're going to have with AI is fine, because it's got to run once.
Right.
And so I'm going on about that
before we go too far on that.
Yeah. Anyway,
let's just skip that.
AI is a great topic. Yeah,
we'll talk more about it in other episodes.
Yeah, we
season
can go
2.
In season 2, that's right. We're putting a pin in this. This is the end of season 1. As much like Star Wars: A New Hope was episode 4, this is season 1.
This is season 7.
Yeah, it's season 7.
Stay tuned for seasons 1 through 6 coming up.
Yes. Isaac, I am your father.
You're not.
No, I am not.
All right, so what did we learn this year? A year in review.
Yes.
After all of our chatting about don't rewrite, as we were pontificating, there were some things that came to fruition, like other terms that we've made up, things that we kind of realized as we talked them out loud. What are some things that you can think of that were the highlights this past year?
Well, I think we found the only use case, or the only case we found so far, where a rewrite is successful. And by successful, we mean the old system gets turned, like the new system goes into production and it completely replaces the old system, and the old system gets turned off. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the definition of success for a rewrite. There has to be an external forcing function. Like in this case, when we talked to the Khan Academy, Google was our cloud provider, and Google was not going to support the version of Python they were using, and they had to switch, or Google was going to turn them off.
Yes, it's a big forcing hand there.
And I think anything less than that, you could have the rewrites could provide value and get fairly far, but the actual getting to the very end and turning off the old one, there had to be an external forcing function.
There was one with Ryan, one of our guest episode ones, where they had hired. I think the two developers knew Python, so they rewrote something in Python for the sake of those developers and for the sake of hiring. So I think the forcing function there is the fact that it was more fiscally responsible for their hiring process to rebuild something in a language that made it easier to hire for and easier to support for the current developers. That's the only other kind of tangential one, because theirs was successful too.
Okay, that is a bit of a force. Like, you can't hire developers to maintain the current system
for a dead language or something. Dead language.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that is, I mean, that also seems like a forcing function of, like, I can't hire, I can't hire people in this language. Like, I don't necessarily want to change languages, but I have to.
So yeah, I like the general kind of forcing function phrase. You have to have a good enough forcing function, or your rewrites will fail. And that forcing function is usually not there in 99% of cases where people want to rewrite for the sake of any other less than super important reason.
Right. Yeah, I almost said that another forcing function, but we didn't get into it, was government regulations. But even then, I'm pretty sure that almost every time the old code was never really turned off or removed. They just, like, hacked a new pathway in. Like, a government regulation change can be a forcing function because you cannot argue with it.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like in all those cases, it didn't actually end up as a rewrite. It was just a hacky.
So, like, if you had to do a security patch or some kind of upgrade for some system because that was the one compliant with some other thing. Sometimes you might upgrade, but you're really just CC shipping the upgrade. You're not really
Right.
actually doing a big bang rewrite. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Government can change the law, and then you have to change the software. But generally speaking, you're going to Theseus ship it or just hack it in, and you're not going to just rewrite it.
So, speaking of Theseus shipping, that is a word we've made up. For anybody listening to just the last episode, let's go ahead define Theseus shipping again one more time for the audience.
So the idea of Theseus shipping is the Ship of Theseus, which is a philosophical construct about permanence and change. And going way back to Greek mythology, Theseus is the guy, he slays the Minotaur, brings back the children of Athens from Crete, and becomes a hero. And to celebrate that, the heads of Athens, for 300 years, every year on the anniversary of this, they would take his ship out and they'd go sailing around the harbor. And I think it was Aristotle, but I'll have to Wikipedia it. Anyway, one of the great Greek philosophers pointed out that, hey, by this point, 300 years later, the original ship is gone. Like 100% of the ship of Theseus that Theseus sailed on and stepped on has been rotted and been replaced because the Athenians were maintaining the ship all the time. And so the question is, when, if ever, did it stop being the ship of Theseus? Or did it ever stop being the ship of Theseus? And we're kind of using that to describe, because some of the pushback we get is, oh, well, we say never rewrite. And what do we mean? Well, we say iteratively replace everything until the original is all gone. And it's like, well, how is that not a rewrite? It's like, well, like the ship of Theseus, if you iteratively replace it, when does it ever become not the ship of Theseus? And so we say Theseus shipping or Theseus ship, where we mean iteratively replace all the existing code, such that, and I think the big point of that is you always have a working ship or a working code. Right. Like there is only ever one piece of code. You don't have a second piece that you're building separate and then you're going to put it into production in what is known as a big bang, where you turn off the old system and turn on the new system.
Right. So an interesting follow-up to that is, let's say you're the first developer on the project and your name is Theseus. You come back to it 20 years later. Is that your code? Is that the project you worked on 20 years ago?
I feel like we now need to go find a Greek developer named Theseus and ask him these questions. And we need to do it cold.
If I have a son, I'll name him Theseus. We can start this experiment.
We need to find a Greek developer named Theseus, and we need to ask him these questions cold, so he's no idea what we're talking about. And
film the whole thing.
Well, yeah, and it'll be a Fuck Up Friday type episode where...
Yeah.
All right, no idea what we're talking
about. So back to our year in review. What's our second? So we have forcing functions kind of required for a successful rewrite. What else did we learn?
We learned that rewrites are risky because they encourage you to make and stick to risky decisions. And I think this was something that we sensed, but we didn't really have an idea of what we were talking of like how and why until we went through it a few times.
I think maybe with the epiphany was maybe with Colleen and Nathan on that episode. Right, because that's when risk popped up as like, whoa, this is the one. It was episode 4 on the Nozomi, and I think you called out at the end of that like, the rewrite itself was a risky one because they were trying to mitigate risk by doing some small pieces first, and that ended up being kind of like the most risky decision.
Right. Yeah, that's what caused me to have the epiphany. I didn't have it during the episode. It was later. I think it was episode 7, where we realized that if you decide to do a rewrite, you are actually making a single gigantic risky bet that the rewrite is the right decision. Because by doing a rewrite, you aren't doing any of the maintenance or the transformational on the current system.
Right. So even if you're tackling small pieces inside the rewrite that are less risky, the decision itself was so risky that the small piece really doesn't matter in comparison to the decision to do a rewrite.
Right. Yeah. Because you're not able to iteratively deliver the new system, it sets up an all or nothing binary stakes. You either get the whole thing or you get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking about, a couple developers and 6 months of time, that's a $500,000 bet,
Right.
and that's a lot of money, or at least it is to us.
It's to me.
It's a lot of money to me. At a team level, organizational level, making $500,000 bets that you don't realize you're making is a bad. Just it's bad to make a $500,000 bet if you don't know that you're making
it. Sure. All right. So what else on our list?
Well, we learned that really rewrites discourage. It's kind of a perverse incentive. Rewrites discourage learning about the current system until the end. Right? If you're going to iteratively improve the current system, you're going to spend all your time learning about the current system and iteratively improving it and fixing the problems until you get to a point where there are no problems because you've fixed them all. Right. Whereas if you're going to do a rewrite, you're like, hey, this one's so bad, I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm going to do something new. And invariably what happens is you get to near the end, and you're like, oh, well, this column 10% of the time doesn't produce the right value. So now you have to dig into the system and find out why, like what's happening 10% of the time. And then you're either going to have to spend a lot of time, and the reason is probably going to be something that doesn't match the model because it's an edge case. And you're either going to end up muddying the brand new clean system to match the old system, or you're just going to spend a lot of time on it, or both.
I think the way we kind of worded it was, by the time that you spent all the investigation and characterization of your current code in the effort of painting what the new system should look like, that exact same investigation is the same investigation that you need to write tests and to fix your current code. Mm-hmm. It's the same investigation you would be doing if you were trying to do a bug fix, for example, or to see why things differ for one value in the database.
We should come up with a word for this.
Yeah, there's a good one for that one. So in general, if you're already doing this work anyway, don't push it towards a risky rewrite. In fact, there's two other books, the famous Clean Code book, and then also Tidy First by Kent Beck I have over here, that talk about
I've been meaning to read that.
They talk about this kind of similar thing of just basically coding for reading, not for writing. Mm-hmm. So the next person who comes in, there's a chapter in each book basically that talks about this. The next person who comes in has to go through that entire process of understanding what a thing did too, unless you take a moment before you push things up and after you have your epiphany of, oh, this is what the code is doing. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and scatter some comments in there, rename some variables, do some small little tidyings that you can do. That way the next person who comes in there goes, and has that epiphany, like 10 minutes faster, right? So this is kind of like the tidying is like a kind of a small step before that thesis shipping. So anyway, all that investigation can be done to thesis ship faster and then make your system better, such that you don't have to try to attempt a risky big bang rewrite.
Well, I'd even say that it's part of thesis shipping is cleaning it up so that you can figure out what the heck's going on. Related thing, I talked one episode, it was running an iterative workshop. So episode 22, we're looking at a list, dear viewers. So episode 22, I talked about running an iterative workshop. And this has actually been very successful. So I've tried a number of things in the past, but I'm now running 3 different workshops at my day job on 3 different terrible pieces of code that we have and working with 3 different groups of developers. And it has been remarkably successful. So the piece that we've been working on the longest, the original code is gone. Like there are very few lines of the original code left. And what had started off as literally 1,000-line function is now 3 classes and everything is injected, and there are lots of tests, and it's still not beautiful. Like there's a lot of stuff in there that's weird because it does a lot of things, like the concerns aren't separated and everything else. But you can walk into this piece of code and it's like, oh, here's what it's going to do, right? And then it's going to, the main thing is, oh, it's going to execute, and then there's like 5 functions. It's like prepare, validate, do the work, and then call side effects. I guess there's 4 main functions, and and they do what they say, and there's really random stuff in there about that, but and you can walk in and you will understand it.
Yeah, and I bet you the developers are less scared to make a change to that code now too.
Oh, they are fearless on that code now. They're like, yeah, a couple MRs a week.
Yeah.
The test passed and they're confident that if the test passed, that it's good.
Yep.
And then
that's the key. Yeah, that's great.
Right. And in the session I've started most recently, I had some code today where I found half of a mutex, where we're removing a mutex to prevent double writing of something.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere along the line, the beginning of the mutex disappeared. So we're freeing the mutex, but we never set it anymore.
Okay.
So it's a waste. You might think that there's a mutex, and you might think that it's doing something to protect you with concurrency, and you would be wrong. The mutex is a lie.
That's a good quote.
Yeah. I put that in the comment. I'm like, the cake, and then I crossed out cake is a lie, and then I wrote mutex is a lie. So I recommend that episode, because and maybe we should do a follow-up episode about it.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
But that one I think hits. I've stumbled on. I iterated my way to a good iterative workshop that I think you can bring to your company, and it will be, it may be successful. I'm having good success with it.
Yeah, you should write a lot of those steps down too in a more like a visual format for people, and maybe publish that to show kind of like your steps of doing that. That way, you don't have to listen to the whole episode. Get the key summary of it.
I mean, hearing our voices, isn't that just reward enough?
I mean, I would think so, but for some reason,
yes.
All right. What's next? What else have we learned here? Reducing risk. That was a main one. Writing tests to reduce risk to make people more comfortable change code. We kind of just touched on that with your workshop doing just that.
Yeah. I want to call out. We have I think they're very underrated, episodes 26 and 27. We had a special guest, Adil Farad. Did I say that?
Yes.
Farid. He talked about being a developer in India in the 1980s and writing the first computerized ticketing system for India's railways. And
that was baffling. That was incredible.
And it's so good.
And it all started with them thinking he was the wrong type of engineer, like a civil engineer versus a computer engineer.
They're so good.
Insane, yeah.
But it's got everything that you could possibly want. He's iteratively delivering. He's getting literal political and corruption, like political pressure and corruption. That the ticket agents are swiping the tickets basically and then reselling them to people who actually want to take the trains out of higher. There's so much. You can almost make a
movie out of it, man. Like, it actually is dramatic for someone making software. It's quite dramatic.
Yes.
They're talking about people being so angry about the trains that they would be like mobs would form, and they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't know that you're the guy working on."
Oh yeah, they had to get escorted out by soldiers. Like
that's a movie, man.
That's good. That you could do that. He's a great guy. If you haven't
listened to those episodes, you should go back and listen to those 2 episodes because that was astounding.
Yeah.
All right, what is next on our list here? We had Khan Academy. It's rewriting in the age of AI. We talked about that already. Do more with less was our most recent one.
Yeah.
A lot of pontification on different ideas here. I'm trying to think of ones that were some episodes that kind of stuck out. The subtle art of refusing meetings. That was a fun one at the beginning of this year. Yeah. Hopefully some of you out there have declined some meetings or refused some meetings this year to clear out your calendar. Or just at least, I think that one was mainly about reflecting on recurring meetings that you kept out of habit, but then you went, oh, maybe I should cancel that because it's actually not serving me anymore, but it did a year ago, that
Right.
kind of thing.
One episode that I think we're going to dive deeper on in season 2, becoming episode 36, becoming an expert in your company's business.
Yeah.
I've kind of avoided the topic a little bit because it's only tangentially related about, how if you understand what your company's business is and how they make money and all of those things, you'll be a better developer, which in turn means that you'll be better able to decide not to rewrite software because you'll know that how it does or doesn't impact anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is a large vein of understanding business for developers that we should tap in the next season.
I think so too, because we've tied this in with AI a few times on one of our episodes discussing AI, and that with AI, some of the more heads down work becomes less impressive, and becoming more human and doing things that AI can't do, like negotiating with your team, negotiating with your business, understanding how your business works. Things that are a little more difficult for the AI to understand become more valuable. So if you're that team member that's like, I just want to put my head down and work by myself and get things done, that becomes much less valuable of a trait over time as people who are able to be very human in how they deliver software.
Right. Yeah. I firmly believe that I just tell me what to write and I'll write it are the developers who will eventually be replaced by AI, and developers who are like, no, tell me the problem and let's figure out how to solve it are the developers who are not.
I think so too. So yeah, that's going to be a really great topic. I think coming up with, we're going to inevitably have more episodes on AI. In fact, I recently saw an article showing kind of the growth of certain jobs, the decline of certain jobs, the salary decline of different back end versus front end roles versus machine learning roles. So it's gonna it's gonna come up again as an episode topic, but it's also really interesting to see the trends in hiring and the trends in popular languages as a way of almost kind of, I hate the term future proofing, but more like just preparing as a way of preparing for your career. Your career is going to change. In 10 years, your career will look different, very different.
Yes.
And so at least understanding how the trends are moving now will help you kind of learn and pivot to that. Because the whole thing about our industry is that our skills will expire. Languages will die. People will stop using certain languages. Different frameworks will come up that will make things like, I'm not installing LAMP or WAMP on my machine anymore. I'm using Terraform to make if infrastructure gets spun up in the cloud. Like that completely revolutionized the DevOps in general didn't exist. All kinds of things. So keeping on top of that will be a great episode filler in the future.
Yes, I would love to do an episode on DevOps and Deming. I will put that down in my notes.
There we go.
All right. Should we call out because I think we had about 10 interviews and we talked about Adil, but they were all great. Episode 4, we talked with Nathan and Colleen about a rewrite disaster, a failed rewrite named Nozomi. Episode 8, we talked to Brian about transforming internal software into a SaaS. And that's a super interesting episode as well. And the difficulty of, the idea of, I've got this software that we're using to run our business. And we have competitors, and our software, one of our competitive advantages is our software is better. So clearly we could sell this software to our competitors as a SaaS. And he's been involved in a couple of those things and why that did not work particularly well.
Okay.
Thomas Morris came on to talk about company culture.
That was a good one. Yeah. I think company culture
Twice.
in general is one that's... Yeah. In general, we have not really had a lot of interesting chats around culture versus just like kind of more technical chats. So I think culture, we've had a couple about, I guess, about like, toxic cultures, and the one with Ryan about like rewrites from a manager's perspective and how to push back on like employees who really want to rewrite, and you have to kind of let them know that, but like advocate for them still so they still feel heard, and like all the nuances there. So I think we have done some episodes on definitely company culture, but I feel like there's still quite a few areas we haven't touched yet.
Yeah. Episode 13, we had on a developer named Josh Beckham. He talked about transitioning from microservices to a monolith. That was super interesting because it's a contrarian view and how that worked out for him. We had episode 25. We had Brian Geneseo, he head of not head of, but the head of development for Khan Academy, and this is an example of a successful rewrite, and it's a cautionary tale because of just how brutal things were to get it done, and for everyone who wasn't a developer. Like I think he said that they 99% turnover in their product group because they just couldn't do any more products.
And notably, he did say that although it was a success and there was a forcing function that made it happen, that he did not believe it could happen again. Like if they were to try it one more time, he didn't believe it would succeed. So it was just like, I think he felt, if you listen to the very tail end of the episode, he felt like that it was almost a fair amount of luck that helped him succeed, even after all of the strife.
Yeah.
So that is a good cautionary tale.
And then the last one, episode 39, we talked about Project Risk with Jonathan Stark. If you're in the consultant freelancer space, you may have heard of Jonathan Stark. He's the guy behind Hourly Billing is Nuts. And, the risk around just billing hourly, he considers it highly risky because fundamentally the customer doesn't know. It's hard. They can't judge whether or not it's going to be worth it because they don't know what they're going to pay until they get to the end. And we had a great episode where we were talking about that related to the idea of a rewrite where you don't know if it's going to succeed until you get to the end, and similarly highly risky things. So that was an interesting episode as well.
It was a good one. Yeah, it was really interesting. I knew I had heard you talk about him before a few times to me. I think you introduced me to his podcast. So I think being able to actually meet him in person and hear, straight from him, his beliefs on that was actually kind of a cool. It's like when you meet somebody and you listen to them for a bit, and then you actually get to meet them, in person or over the Zoom call. It's like, oh, cool. I've been listening to you for a while.
Yeah, no, I've been listening to him for like 6 or 7 years. I'm a super fan, so I was super excited to have him on.
Nice.
Made it all worthwhile.
Yeah. All right. And then, we touched on episode 41 where Ryan Cowan came on briefly to talk about managing developers that want to push for rewrites, or what kind of pressures exist in companies that either push for or against rewrites, and also how to placate developers that don't feel heard whenever they try to push. Like, why are you pushing for the rewrite? Is it because of X, Y, and Z, or do you feel like this needs to be fixed? Do you feel like you're not being heard when you said that needs to be fixed? How do you make the person feel heard and know that you've been trying to advocate for them? Is there some kind of compromise that you can do instead? So all the kind of interesting aspects of it, from like understanding that really we're all just humans, and people wanted to rewrite things because it makes things easier for them, or they're concerned about a problem, or they want to do good work, and all this kind of like these other aspects of it that are not just technical aspects.
Right. Yeah. I think we should make a call out to, that we would love to hear from you. We did 10 episodes, 10 guest episodes in season 1. Mm-hmm. We would love to do 52 guest episodes. If we had volunteers, we would do more guest episodes.
52 out of 52 for season 2.
So, yeah. Look, we could even go over if we really got a backlog of people wanting to be heard. So, we would love to hear from you and have you on, whether you agree with us or not. Yeah, we are happy to have contrarian opinions on.
There's the more exciting ones, actually. Yeah. Stump us live.
Yeah,
that would be great. I would love to put that on the internet.
And it's doable. You can prove us wrong probably on some parts. I think we should leave it there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Happy anniversary to the podcast, y'all.
Happy anniversary.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.